Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Laslo, and you are here, and how to get to there. So this presentation is going to be a map for new Mac admins, particularly focusing on individual Mac admins and small teams that are managing a lot of responsibilities. So my goals with this presentation are to give you some useful skill sets and mindsets to help you grow, especially if you're very new to your career or transitioning from other type of IT into Mac admins. Give you some of the basic concepts and resources, intro to MDM, intro to identity management, that kind of stuff. And just give you some examples from my professional journey. So if that seems like it is too basic for where you are, I will not be upset if anyone wants to walk out and go to a different session. That is totally fine with me. This presentation will not be a technical deep dive on any particular topic. It's not going to be any kind of in-depth guide on managing yourself or your team. There will be some guidance on how to, grow and manage things, but most importantly, it is not a substitute for professional psychiatric or medical treatment. I am not qualified for that, and I probably need some myself. Okay, so that out of the way, a little bit about me. I am a senior IT director at a global advertising agency based out of Rhode Island. I have been with the company since 2012, and I've been doing some form of dedicated IT professionally for 10 plus years. As of right now, I am responsible for all technology within the organization, so help desk, security, network, you name it. If it plugs into a wall or a network, it is in my purview. And my little fun fact is in 2023, I took about 7 months off and hiked the entire 2,200-mile Appalachian Trail, which starts in Georgia and ends in Maine. So yeah, that's my fun fact. I am happy to talk about any of that, and anybody that's run into me this conference will tell you I probably mentioned that at least once very quickly. So, okay, you're here. Good job. You chose to be in this room and you chose to be in this conference. So you've already taken the steps necessary to begin growing in your particular role. Hopefully this is a recap of a lot of the stuff that you've already seen this week. This is going to cover a lot of sessions that I know I've heard familiar things in, but I want to just remind people that you're never going to know less than you do today. So, you may feel a little overwhelmed. You may feel like you don't quite know where you're going or, what all of these crazy terms that have been thrown around all week mean. That's okay. You already know more than you did when you walked in the door, and you're just going to continue to grow as you continue to develop in your IT career. And also try and remember that you know more than you think you do. I know after my first Mac Admins conference, I felt totally overwhelmed. We were in a spot where we didn't have a lot of the technologies being mentioned. I had not heard of a lot of the technologies being mentioned, and I kind of felt like I was way behind that curve. That's okay. You know a lot more than you think you do. You've been in your role for a while, probably at least, a few months to a year, a couple years, and you are qualified for that role. So don't get overwhelmed. Don't get freaked out. Now, what you do need to ask yourself is, where do you want to go? IT is not a one-stop destination. It's not, I'm getting to the end of IT in 10, 20, 30 years. I'm going to be at the same spot as everybody else. I mean, there's no career path that way, but IT is such a wide target. So keep that in mind. Where do you want to go, and how would you like to get there? Not everybody wants to be a CTO or a CIO, and that's fine. If you like working in the help desk, awesome. Keep developing those skills, figure out a way to, enjoy doing support for people. If you want to be a networks engineer, do networking. If you like to wear multiple hats, that's where I'm most comfortable. I like doing a little of everything. Doing one thing every day just isn't going to cut it for me, but having that flexibility to manage and oversee a lot of things is important to me. I'm sure you've all seen it throughout this whole week, but this community is going to support you. They're going to lift you up. They're going to give you help, but you do have to do the work yourself. Yes, you can call any one of these vendors and whatnot and MSPs, and they'll do the work for you, but they're not going to do it for free. If you want to develop, if you want to grow, you've got to take those steps. You've got to figure out how you're going to advance. So kind of the central theme of all this is What do you want to be when you grow up? You should never look to be stagnant. You should always be looking to advance in some trajectory. So when I started putting this presentation together, my plan was to give you all the tools I put in place in my organization, go, here's what you need to do. And I realized I work at a creative agency. We have a very different workflow than a manufacturing shop or a financial house. So giving you the list of tools that we implemented and trying to bundle it up as a kit wasn't really going to be the answer. But what I did realize is that the mindsets that I feel like I've cultivated over the last 7 plus, 10 plus years, and what I've seen within other admins that really progress is these growth mindsets. You want to just, keep that in mind. How do you keep developing? If you're brand new and you're feeling overwhelmed, just show up. Like, that seems super obvious to a lot of people, but just by showing up to your job and being on time, or honestly early, that old adage that on time is late and early is on time, that can make a big difference, especially if you're doing any kind of events-driven work. Like I said, I used to do video production. I used to do some work with theater. And if you are on time or late, like, you are bringing things to a grinding halt. By just showing that you're engaged, it makes a big difference. Bring a positive attitude. It's really easy in IT to start to feel burnt out, and the curmudgeonly IT guy is a stereotype for a reason. But if you can bring that positive attitude, it's going to show to your leadership, and it's going to show to your colleagues. They're going to want to work with you. And be present. Don't be sitting on your phone waiting for a help desk ticket to come in. Don't be sitting there just like wandering around doing nothing. Figure out how you can be making a difference in those times. Engage with your colleagues, engage with your teammates, and just show that you are a part of the organization. Ask questions. It's important to be curious, but not judgmental. You get that help desk ticket that says, help, the printer doesn't work. And your first instinct is, oh God, there's a paper jam and nobody can figure out how to open a paper tray. Yeah, that might be the case. But also, if you had to go to your finance person and say, how do I put this expense report in? They can have the same reaction to you. So remember that just because you know more on the technology side doesn't mean you know more or are smarter than any of your other colleagues. And if you can look at them as equals and not, a problem to solve, that again builds trust, it builds rapport. And so when there are bigger issues, your colleagues are going to want to come to you. It's honestly one of the best compliments that I've received. We've had people leave our organization and come back and go, I never realized how responsive you guys are, how much you care about what we do. And it's those little touch points where, we're not making them sit in limbo waiting for a response on a help desk ticket. We're not making them, wait for weeks to get a solution to a simple problem. We're engaging, we're responding quickly. And to that end, ask if you could help. So if you walk by someone and you hear, hey, my computer's running really slow. Okay, maybe they didn't put a help desk ticket in, but do you have 5 minutes to spare? Just go pop over and say, hey, I heard you having a problem. How can I help you with that? Can I do something to make your life better? They might say no. They might be like, I'm off to a meeting, or it's fine. I know I just need to reboot. I haven't restarted in 600 months. And okay, now everyone knows the solution. So, but being proactive, again, it just builds that rapport. Getting organized. This one's a struggle for me. I wear 1,000 different hats in my company. I have 2 people that are underneath me that are managing some of our technology, but mostly help desk. So I have spent a long time trying to figure out how to organize myself, because if you look in this backpack, there is just a bundle of papers all thrown together. There is no organizational system. So I went and found, for me, Getting Things Done, it's a book. It has a lot of different processes to go through your day, your week, your month to figure out how to keep things moving. And I think one of the things that I found is being able to go to leadership and stakeholders and say, hey, we talked about this last week. There's been no movement on it. What can we do to keep this moving? Again, it shows that you care, it shows that you're engaged, and it shows that you're trying to help to move things along. There's nothing worse than a leader coming up to you and going, hey, we talked about that thing 3 weeks ago. Where is it at? And you go, oh, I totally forgot. I'm so sorry. And that happens time and time again. Like, it just starts to reflect poorly on you. The biggest thing out of all the getting things done methodology for me was write down every task somewhere, even if it's just in a notebook, and check that system every week. If you can take an hour or two on Friday and go through your calendar, go through your to-do list, and go through any outstanding emails and just get them into a list so that when you go into Monday, you have that clear target. It's going to make your head clearer. It's going to make it easier for you to figure out what you need to do and how to prioritize that work. And that, especially as a solo Mac admin or a small team Mac admin, can make all of the difference. And that's not to say that you have to follow it to the letter. Getting things done is really complex, and there's a lot of additional layers. Honestly, I have adjusted it. I've stripped out a lot of those pieces. So find a system, test a couple of them, see what works for you. But it's just really, really helpful to have an organizational framework to keep yourself grounded when things get really busy. Embrace your mistakes. So trust is everything within an organization, and nothing ruins trust faster than trying to sweep a big mistake under the carpet. Hey, I forgot to do that project. Hey, I accidentally pushed this configuration and half the servers or half the network went offline. Oh yeah, no, I didn't do that. I had no idea what that was. That wasn't me. Well, yeah, when all of a sudden they do a post-mortem on the situation and find out, oh, you definitely did it and you know you did it. Leadership isn't going to trust you. They're going to be putting guards around you and try and figure out what that is. That's not good for you. It's not good for the organization. So just embrace the mistakes. But you don't have to get everything right the first time either. I don't know about you guys, but with the education system, when I would turn in a paper or take a test, you flunk that paper, you flunk that test. That was it. You had one shot and it was done. Maybe the teacher would give you extra credit, but that 65 was still sitting there for eternity, and you're just like, okay, well, that happened. That's not usually how it works in the real world. You have those opportunities to go back. You wrote a script, it's not doing what you want it to do. Okay, fix it. You implemented a new technology and it's not operating effectively. Figure out what went wrong and iterate on it. But don't just call it a one and done and move on to the next thing. Even in an event where, like, if the whole show falls apart, learn from that for the next time. So try and break yourself of that habit, because I've seen a lot of people that end up getting kind of this paralysis of, well, I can't get it right, so I'm not going to do it. It's better to try it and not have it go 100% correct than to not do it at all. And then this is one of my favorite things, is the Dunning-Kruger effect. And this chart up here, which puts you at when you have the highest confidence in your ability to do something, it's probably when you know the least. And that puts you at the peak of Mount Stupid. You bull into a situation and you have everything fall apart around you. And very suddenly, you're now in this valley of despair. And you're like sitting down there going, what just happened? I was completely confident this was going to work, and I now have no idea, and I'm never going to solve this, and everything's awful. And that is generally not true, because you're going to do some more research, you're going to do some more investigation on it, and now you are climbing up that slope of enlightenment. And it might be a couple of days, a couple of weeks, but you'll hit that plateau of sustainability if you keep pushing through it. And that's not a one-time thing. And that's, I think, hard for people to accept, is just because you've been working in your field for years doesn't mean you're not going to have an incident like this. My quick story, and I'm going to go fast because I also realized that I thought I had 75 minutes for a presentation, and I have an hour, so if I start moving fast, flag me. But when I first transitioned over into the IT role full-time, I made what I thought was a simple permissions change on our server so that access would be more restricted. We were using time machine backups, and I did a test, and it was fine. It showed no changes in the backups, so I did it to the whole server. And then I checked 10 minutes later, and it said, backing up the entire server again. You don't have enough room. We are deleting all previous backups, and we're starting over. And so I had to go to my boss and say, hey, I'm really sorry. I tested this. It still didn't work. I am now in the valley of despair because I have deleted all of the backups for the last 2 or 3 years. Thankfully, we had additional drives that had older backups. We weren't totally out of luck, but it happened. And now we have a working solution. We don't rely on Time Machine anymore, and we're in the plateau of sustainability. So last week I went to make a network configuration change, and I was right back at that peak of Mount Stupid. I said, this will take me 20 minutes. 4 hours later, I was staring at these configuration profiles and just losing my mind. And about a day later, started climbing back out and found a solution. But you will constantly be in different cycles of this Dunning-Kruger effect throughout your career. So when you hit that frustration point, try and remember that, and that you may feel like all is lost, but that's a normal part of the cycle. And my last mental thing to keep in the back of your mind is skill stacking. This is one of the things that I think is really important for everybody to remember is, am I the best Mac admin? No, I am not. Am I the best network engineer? Definitely not. But taking my unique blend of skills makes me the best version of myself. So this is a kind of a representation of some of my interests. Video production. I did technical theater in high school and college. I was, stage crew, lighting, sound. I have a passion for managing Apple products and using Apple products, and also for exploring the great outdoors, amongst a bunch of other things that I have done throughout my life. That makes me uniquely qualified for the role that I have. I am wearing all of these different hats, so I am probably in the top 10 of people that have those particular blends of skills on top of each other. So take a step back, look at what you're passionate about, look at where you excel, and really step up and pat yourself on the back for where you've come from. And the earlier you are in your career, that list might feel smaller, but believe me, those clubs you did in high school, those activities you did in college, the work you did freelance or whatever it was, wherever that got you to where you are, that's makes you uniquely you. And within that, you can and should grow beyond your original job description. This might seem kind of counterintuitive, but when you take that set of skills and that thing you're passionate about, how can you take your role and grow it a little further? Our 2 help desk engineers, one of them is passionate about Docker and automation, and he started a year ago and has kind of remodernized our technology stack to move a bunch of stuff over to Docker. Was that part of the plan when we hired him? Absolutely not, but we're there now, and he's advanced our architecture. And then our other engineer, he is a Python programmer. He likes to do automation in that capacity. So we've started doing a lot more work with our APIs and being able to bring a bunch of data together, as well as building Slack bots. That wasn't anything we were doing 2 years ago. So by them taking the skills that they brought to us, they were able to really grow their role and advance our organization. We're getting to the technical, but I do want to give you some words of wisdom that people have given to me. So the first one is, it's not your company. If you are working for somebody else, it's not your company. You say, hey, I want to implement this new MDM, or I want to implement this new networking technology. And they go, great, what's it cost and what's it going to do? And you give them that information, they go, it's just not in the budget right now. We don't have the resources. And it's really easy to take that personally. But at the end of the day, they have to balance all of those cost and security decisions on pictures that we never even have. Hey, we just lost 2 clients that we didn't know about, so we don't actually have any spare cash right now, and you're asking for $10,000 for a new server. It sounds great, but we can't afford it. So try and keep that in mind when you get told no, or you get told we're going to do something a different way. It's not your company. And in that regard, make the best choice with the information you have. This is something my boss tells me all the time. Decision paralysis is a real thing. There's so many different technologies out there. I think there's 7 or 8 MDM providers at this conference alone. So when you suddenly have all of these tools, how do you decide? You can sit there in decision paralysis for hours or days, or you can take in all the information you have, do your research, and then make a decision. It's better to make a decision and then have to improve upon it than never make a decision, because a decision will be made for you, and it's usually not a good one. You can't do this alone. If you are a solo Mac admin, you need to start finding resources to improve your workflows. So use the Mac admin Slack. If you truly are solo and you're the only person responsible for technology in your company, start finding what I would call tech ambassadors within your organization. Is there somebody in another department that understands that particular technology. Is there a designer that understands Creative Cloud? Is there someone in your finance team that's an Excel whiz? So when somebody has a problem, you have somebody to turn to and say, hey, I don't know this. Can you help me? So that is huge. And also start looking for trusted vendors and partners. We worked with a local MSP, and when things got a little too out of our depth, we at least had a number we could call and say, hey, what will this project cost to get off the ground? And can you give us some advice on where to start? And don't be afraid to say, I don't know. People generally prefer that you are unsure rather than blustering bravado that turns out not to be true. So, don't walk into a room and it's like, yes, I know everything about this and you don't have to worry about it. And they come in a day later and everything is on the floor on fire. It's part of being human, and it's better, like I said, not to know it. Say, I don't know. I'm going to do some research. I'll get back to you. That's the follow-up to that. If you just say, I don't know, and leave it at that, you're not going to make a lot of allies. But if you're upfront and say, hey, give me a couple days to do some research, figure out what this tool is and how we can support it, you're going to make a lot better inroads with your colleagues. Okay, now we're going to get into the technical overview. This is where I will be giving you a little bit of a breakdown on the tools that I think are necessary to build an organization from the ground up if you have no resources in place. I'm hoping for a lot of people that this is an overview of things you've either heard this week or in the past, but if this helps one person out of just kind of grasping the basics of being a Mac and system administrator, then I've done my job. Some quick background about me. When I started in IT, I transferred off of our video team and into IT full-time. We were about 40 people. We had a very deep focus on speed and efficiency of delivering projects to clients. There wasn't room for downtime. IT was a one-man band. We had our CTO. He retired unexpectedly, and I was handed the keys to the kingdom as the new IT manager. So I came in thinking I knew everything and learned very quickly I knew nothing. We had pretty solid security foundations, but everything was manually managed. OS updates, Adobe updates, any application updates was going computer to computer, or if I was lucky, through Apple Remote Desktop and pushing some kind of bash script. But mostly it was, we were relying on old technologies and aging technologies, Apple Remote Desktop, Mac OS Server. So we had a lot of areas where the writing was on the wall that we were going to start running into long-term problems if we didn't start to evolve. And it was also clear that our organization was entering a period of rapid growth. In 2016, we were about 40 people. I think by 2018, 2019, we were up to 60 or 70. So we had almost doubled in size in a couple of years. And then when we hit the pandemic, we also started hiring remote because, well, if everyone's out of the office, then we don't need everyone on-prem. So we can now hire anywhere, which is great, except we didn't have an MDM. When I took over in 2016, I lacked knowledge of any kind of terminal commands or scripting. I was convinced that if I typed one letter wrong of a terminal command, I was going to delete the entire computer or any device. I didn't really know any of the networking besides what IPv4 kind of was, and that DHCP and DNS were important, but not how to manage them. And besides knowing that MDM was cool and important, I knew nothing about it. I didn't know how it got configurations to devices. I didn't know what it took to enroll a device. So I was starting at square zero. So if you're in a similar spot, if you're finding yourself in a place where you are starting a new organization and you're getting handed all of these responsibilities, here's what I recommend for leveling up in IT. You want to make sure that you are implementing some kind of mobile device management. It's pretty much required by Apple at this point if you are managing at scale. You need some kind of identity management. If you're small, 10, 20 people, you can probably get away with skipping this for now, but it will streamline things in the future. Application management. So having some way to deploy apps, to update apps, to manage settings for those applications. Otherwise, again, you're going computer to computer and saying update, 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 and you will lose your mind quickly. And then having some kind of help desk situation in place. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but getting those notifications out of your email. I'm going to go through all these in some more depth, so don't worry. And also, all the slides and all the resources in this deck have been submitted to the conference, so they'll be on the website, and there is a QR code at the end for some of the links. So those will all be available for you. Additionally, if you've gotten those topics in place, I would recommend focusing on inter-organizational communication, inventory management, backup management, and testing procedures. So, little Apple acronym soup because IT is acronyms, acronyms, acronyms. Hopefully, most of these are review for folks, but if not, MDM and DDM is mobile device management and declarative device management. ABM and ASM is Apple Business Manager and Apple School Manager. VPP is the old name for what Apple is now calling apps and books, but it was the volume purchasing program, and there's a lot of people talking about that and still use VPP. I actually had that in these slides until last night as VPP because that's what it is in my brain. ADE, same thing. This is automated device enrollment, but it was also known as DEP for a long time, which was Device Enrollment Program. APNS is Apple Push Notification Services. And PPPC is the Privacy Preference Policy Control. So we're going to move through these kind of quickly because I am definitely a little behind. But again, flag me if there's things that don't make sense. And I'm hoping to have room for questions at the end. If not, I'm happy to hang out afterwards and answer any questions. But MDM is Apple's dedicated framework for managing iOS, macOS, iPadOS. Any OS that Apple supports is managed through MDM. It uses configuration profiles to apply settings in what I'll call a mostly expected way. MDM can be a little notorious for delivering profiles in the order that your management server wants and not necessarily the way you expect. So you do need to do some testing on that and make sure if configurations rely on each other that they're getting there in the order you expect. At this point, Apple requires an MDM to remotely apply most configuration profiles. I think starting 2018 or 2019, they started really limiting what you could do by just installing a profile on a device. Now it has to come from an MDM. It should be signed. So you want to be aware of that you can't just use anything to install that. Declarative device management is a number of enhancements to the existing MDM framework. The biggest thing for me is that it allows the device to more rapidly communicate with your MDM server. In the past, MDM would push some configurations, and then on a regular cadence, it would check in. With DDM, it actually allows the device to say, hey, I'm out of compliance from what you asked me to be. What should I do? So it helps streamline that. And if you're interested in learning a whole lot more about MDM, Rich Troughton did a presentation in 2020 about the full workflow of MDM from the basics of Apple push notifications all the way up to configuration profiles and MDM servers. So there's a lot of information there, and it wasn't worth it for me to rehash that. Here are some configuration profile examples. File vault encryption means that you can now tell your entire fleet that you want the hard drives encrypted, and then it will also get the recovery key for that encryption and store it with the MDM. So if a user locks themselves out of the device, or if something happens and that user leaves, you still have a way to access the encrypted data on the hard drive. Before, it was managing a lot of personal encryption keys and asking users to send you that information or logging in and doing it yourself. And then the other one that I find very useful is admin user credentials. If you are managing a fleet at scale, you can either push a single admin with a single username and password. I don't recommend this. This is not best practice, but it is an option. Or you can use it to push a single username with a randomized password per device. And usually most MDMs have a way to automatically rotate that password on a set cadence. So I think we're rotating ours every 30 days. And so we have 100 devices with 100 unique passwords, and they rotate every 30 days. So even if something were to happen, you only are compromising one device, not your entire fleet. And that all lives within the MDM as well. Here are some common MDM vendors. Apple Business Essentials is Apple's built-in solution. I would recommend this only for really small organizations. It is pretty much a flat configuration for all of your devices. So if you are looking at a way to set up different profiles and different management solutions for leadership, and then a design team and a finance team, Apple Business Essentials really isn't going to give you that flexibility. You want to look at some of these bigger vendors. Jamf is kind of the gold standard. Everyone knows the name. We went with Mosel. Jamf was just outside of our budget. You know, we're a growing marketing company, but at the time we were implementing MDM, we just did not have the budget available. We were in the pandemic, so Mosel was good. It, I think is not quite as fast as Jamf, but it does 80% of what Jamf does at a fraction of the cost. So look into those solutions. And just keep in mind that MDM and DDM are the foundation for Apple device management. At a minimum, if you're going to be a Mac admin, you need some kind of management solution in your environment, or you are in for a bad time. Apple Business Manager and Apple School Manager are the dedicated portals for managing your Apple devices and not providing configurations to them, but telling them what configuration MDM server to check into. So when you purchase a device from Apple or from an authorized Apple retail reseller, then you tell them, hey, I want you to enroll this in my organization's Jamf instance or Mosel or whatever. And now when that computer first boots up, it's going to understand who and where it belongs. This does require you to register your organization with Apple, so if you don't already have this set up within your organization, you'll probably need to work with your leadership to get the legal documents to get that set up. And then we'll talk about automated device enrollment. So if you don't have this set up in your environment, it's awesome. You open a laptop up, you connect it to Wi-Fi, and it says, hey, I belong to Mark's company. And now I'm going to download all of the configuration profiles that you've already said. So it's not waiting for the user to log in the first time. It's not waiting for having to enroll it manually. It automatically happens. And then the management settings are often applied even before the user first logs in. So you want file vault encryption, you want screensaver lockouts, you want restrictions. That's all there in place. So if you're mailing your devices directly to the end user before IT ever touches them, you know that that device is going to end up in your desired state. Also helpful, if you ever have a loss or theft, devices stay associated with your MDM. So if somebody is able to erase your computer, when it goes back to Setup Assistant, it's popping up and saying, hey, I'm still part of Mark's organization. I'm getting all those same settings again. And usually they won't even have a way to log into the machine because in our case, it's putting that local admin on there first and it pops up right at a login screen. It never even asks them to create a user account. So they're out of luck. Apps and books, I'm going to skip through this mostly, but this is formerly known as the volume purchasing program, and it allows you to buy apps that you would normally get in the App Store and deploy them through your MDM server. So if you need to provide something like Final Cut Pro or any other purchasable or even free app, you can get them through apps and books, assign them through your MDM, and those will automatically deploy and update. So it saves that need for users to have personal or managed Apple IDs. There's been a lot of talk about managed Apple IDs at the conference this week. I will say our organization isn't using them at the moment. I'm starting to see some reasons why we might want to begin looking down that road with platform SSO, but as it stands right now, we've been more than happy to just use apps and books. The big thing is remember that you can't use in-app purchases or subscriptions. So that's kind of the one major drawback to the apps and books model is you cannot say, oh, I need a monthly subscription to, I use MindNode as an organizer and that has an annual subscription. You can't do that. So you have to find other methods. Usually those vendors have a outside of the App Store way to buy those apps. So APNS is Apple Push Notification Service. What you really need to know is this is the way Apple pushes notifications for all apps and MDM alerts to your devices. So you need to have some kind of outbound internet access to Apple's APNS services. Most times IT gets a little squirrely because they think you need to let something into your network. You don't. You just need to let your devices talk to APNS. So you might run into that if you have a network services team that gets a little bit protective about data going in and out of the network. But that is a necessity for MDM. And then probably one of the most important mobile configurations is the privacy preference policy control. And this is what allows you access to things like enabling screen sharing or full disk access or accessibility features for specific apps. This mostly comes up in my environment for allowing screen sharing within Zoom, Slack, Teams. We have a profile for each one of those applications that says, yes, you can enable screen sharing as a non-admin. Otherwise, that person's going to need to enter some kind of admin credential to enable screen sharing. So just keep that in mind. If you are keeping your users as standard users, you will need to set these up for a number of apps. It can also be used to block apps. So if there is some kind of app in your fleet that you don't want to have full disk access, you can push out a profile that says, no, you can, yes, use a microphone and a camera, but you don't get disk access. And systems will accept multiple PBPC profiles. So I definitely recommend creating one per app. Don't try and jam all the information into one, because if you need to update a profile, now it's having to pull the old one off and put the new one on every time you're updating it. So you're kind of risking messing with the other applications. By doing one per, you can say, oh, we don't want to use Zoom anymore. Cool, remove that profile. All the other ones are still there. Okay, we're halfway there. How are we all doing? Good? Awesome. We should have about 25 minutes left, which we do, which means I'm just a little behind schedule. So let's jump into the next set of things. We talked about Apple Business Manager and IDP, and MDM. The next thing I would recommend as you're leveling up your organization is having some kind of identity management. You'll hear IDP thrown around a lot. It's just identity provider. So on the next slide, we'll go over some popular ones. But I mean, if you've heard of Okta, if you've heard of Entra ID or Azure AD, or my particular brand of choice, JumpCloud, those are all IDPs. And what that allows is a single login for most company accounts and resources. So when we use JumpCloud, the user gets a password for their computer. It also allows them to connect to the VPN. Our network is also password protected, so they can access that. And it also gives them access to their email. In addition, JumpCloud has a single sign-on portal, so you go to the JumpCloud website, and now we have a bunch of apps there which don't even require a password. They just click through and say, okay, I want to go to ShareFile, or I want to go to another utility within the organization. It just automatically logs them in. So that can save a lot of friction, and the more tools you can put within your SSO portal, the happier your users will be. The big thing for us is it centralized password policies. We had some security requirements that said your password rotates every 90 days and is at least 8 characters. And we said, well, we want more than that. We want 12 characters. So we were able to set that within JumpCloud, and now that applies across all of these disparate systems. And it gives you central logging. So anytime a user tries to log into their Mac, into VPN, into SSO, we get an alert in JumpCloud about it. So if somebody's having an issue, we now have a place to try and diagnose all that, and we're not trying to go, which system do we need to find? It's all one pane of glass. As we said, popular identity management platforms, Okta, JumpCloud, Microsoft Entra ID. Figure out which one will work within your environment between cost and features, but we've had very good luck with JumpCloud as our IDP of choice. They do offer an MDM solution. I will say at the time we were implementing it, it did not offer all the features that we needed, so we stuck with Mosel, but take a look, it might fit your needs, and then you do get to consolidate that all into one platform. Application deployment. This is something that we implemented probably in the last 4 years, but it's huge for us. And a lot of MDMs will allow you to deploy the apps and books purchases directly, but they may let you do non-App Store apps and non-App Store purchases, but there's usually limitations. So it might be that you can only push a PKG that is 20 megabytes, or you might only be able to push a certain type of PKG. So we found that Mosel's in deployment of that was a little limited. So we went with Monkey. How many people have heard of Monkey? Awesome. So Monkey is an open source utility. It was built by Greg Nagel in 2009. He presented a couple times this week, but he's out of Walt Disney Animation Studios, and the project has grown exponentially since then. At the core of it, it deploys and updates apps across your organization, but it does it on a fully customizable scale. So first of all, you can brand Monkey. So we've now given it kind of a company name, and has company graphics inside of it. So when people open it up, it looks like an app store for my company. People feel like it's part of the brand. It's not, this random open source tool called Monkey. The other thing is that you can now target app deployments either organization-wide or by department or down to the individual device. And it's really easy to do that. So, we have a bunch of creatives that want Photoshop. Cool. You have a license for Photoshop. Here's Photoshop for you. It updates automatically. Then we have team members that need something a little bit more esoteric. We can still put that in there and manage it, but it's only getting given to a couple of people, and the rest of the organization doesn't even see it's in there. So you're not running into this problem of, well, I see it in here, why can't I have it? Unless they've been specifically given access to it, they don't even know that it's there unless one of their colleagues says, oh, I have this, why don't you? Monkey only requires a web server to host all the application installers and the configuration, and then a desktop application for your users to talk to the Monkey server. This can also be modified to run out of Amazon S3, which is what we ended up doing because it allows everything to go through encrypted channels and it's access controlled with S3 API keys. If you are going to start implementing Monkey, I do highly recommend looking into Monkey Admin. I think it might be a little outdated now. I'm not positive. It's been a while since I actually checked that, but it's a GUI. By default, Monkey is mostly command line and plist driven, so you're dealing with a lot of kind of hand coding stuff and using the command line tools to update your Monkey environment. Monkey Admin takes that all out of the command line and gives you a great graphics interface to do all that management for you. And if you want to really get fancy, start looking into auto package, and that will allow you to say, hey, we use Slack. Slack's going to download every day if there's a new version and automatically put it into a testing category in my Monkey server. So you're not spending all day going and downloading those updates. Okay, you've gotten most of the tech stack out of the way now. Those three areas are really going to help you get your team in a centralized and managed state. Now we start looking at some of the benefits to help you out. Help desk. I don't know where everyone's at. When I started, everyone was emailing me. I would get, the printer's jammed, my computer won't work, and it was all coming into my inbox, which was fine because it was only me. The problem was I had ambitions of growing the team. And I also got all the spam from all of the different vendors and recruitment agencies and all that stuff. So people would send me a help desk request, and it would get buried 20 emails deep, and I wouldn't see it for hours. By moving to an actual help desk solution, you get notifications in a central place. All of the support requests are coming into that one location. You can now put a dashboard up on another device and see those requests coming in real time. It takes them out of your inbox, which hopefully keeps your inbox a little saner. And it also starts to build good habits for your company while you're small. Are you 20 people? Get people used to emailing help desk. When you grow to 80 people, those 20 people are now telling their colleagues, hey, you need support? Email the help desk. Don't email Mark directly. And now you, again, have all of those things going to a central place. Hopefully, if you've expanded that much, you've brought on other help desk agents. And now you don't have to tell the company, oh, email that person for this problem, email that person for this problem, email Mark for this problem. It's just email the help desk and we'll route the tickets where they need to go. When you end up going on a vacation, you will thank yourself for not being bombarded with a bunch of support requests and text messages, because that was my life. I would get texts on every vacation I went on going, help! And I'm like, I'm not working today. I appreciate you reaching out. I appreciate the trust, but there's a team to handle this. Okay, communication, as we all know, communication continues to expand and get more complicated the larger your organization gets. So if you can start setting procedures early and often, it does make your life a lot easier. Look into having some kind of chat tool, some kind of video communication tool if you're remote, and kind of putting walls around that. When we hit the pandemic, we had a number of team members that were using Google Meet for chatting. We had a team that was using Slack. We had just implemented Zoom, so people were starting to use Zoom chat, and we had all this communication all over the place. And then other teams started reaching out to me going, hey, they're using Slack. We want to use Slack. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, but we want our own Slack instance. I was like, okay. And then the next team reached out and said, we want Slack, but we want our own Slack instance too. And I said, no. I had a meeting with leadership and I said, this is insanity. We're going to have everyone in different Slack buckets now trying to talk to each other. We're just going to make one big Slack instance. So don't be afraid to kind of put your foot down if you're getting those kind of proposals and just saying, hey, this isn't going to work at scale. Here's what I recommend. And if they say no, it's not your company. The other thing to keep in mind is that those chat platforms do become a repository for historical knowledge. 3 years from now, you go, hey, team worked on this project last year. Can I search Slack and find that? If you're using a lot of DMs, if you're using a lot of direct communication, that becomes a lot harder. So it can be really important to communicate with your team, hey, use public channels, use accessible resources so that that knowledge can be found. And these are some common communication platforms. Inventory management. If you are more than 5 or 10 people, you want some kind of inventory management system in your life. It can be an Excel sheet, that's fine. But just have some record of what does the company own, do they still own it, and when did they get it, and who is responsible for it. Because you're gonna have a time where somebody's getting offboarded unexpectedly, or a device gets stolen, and you wanna be able to look at that and say, yes, this employee had this monitor, this laptop, and these peripherals, and I know that for a fact. Not, I remember giving them a MacBook Pro, but it might have been a 2017 or a 2019, whatever that is. Now you're like, okay, go to law enforcement with that and try and reclaim it. You don't have a serial number, you don't have anything. So start keeping those records. And I also recommend developing some kind of form for team members to sign, especially if people are remote a lot of the time. Just give them a form that says, hey, I gave you serial number XYZ on this date with this configuration. Please acknowledge that you received this. And it just gives them some level of accountability. They can't say, oh, I never received that. You had the laptop, you signed the form. So we have proof that that did at least happen. These are the things I recommend keeping details of. Even just purchase date, serial number. Warranty expiration can be huge if you have AppleCare on your devices. We use Snipe It right now for that, and it will send automatic emails about a month before AppleCare expires. So we can reach out to the user and say, hey, are you having any battery issues? Is there any wear and tear on this that we can get replaced while the device is still under AppleCare? So just something to keep in mind. Backups. Have a backup strategy. I can't stress this enough. Your server and storage platforms are the key things you want to back up. Are you using Google? You're not necessarily backed up. Google has a backup of your data, but if you accidentally delete a file, they're not necessarily going to say, oh yeah, let us pull that back for you. You need some way of ensuring that there's data integrity there. If they delete your data, yeah, they're going to restore it. But if somebody comes in and starts maliciously deleting files, you may not have backups to rely on. So keep that in mind. And if you're using on-prem servers, make sure that you have some kind of backup for that data. You may need to consider end-user backups. Do your end users put everything on the server or in the cloud? You probably don't need endpoint backups. Our creatives like to bring a lot of files local, do a bunch of work on it, and then push the final version up to the server. But that can be 2 or 3 days worth of work. So we're in a spot where we do need to have endpoint backups. So just keep that in the back of your mind as you're setting up these strategies. And there's so many tools, I'm not going to give you a recommendation, but just evaluate your needs, look at the tools you're using, see what supports them. Testing. Everybody has a testing environment. Some people are lucky enough to have a totally separate environment to run production in. I've heard Tom Bridge say this 1,000 times, and I think it is one of my favorite quotes, because if you tell yourself that you don't have a testing environment, you're wrong. You are testing in production and you are playing with fire. You want to make sure that you have at least some kind of segregation between all of your devices and the what does this button do moment, because it's going to happen. So some testing procedures, have a backup, deploy your implementations in stages. We have what we call our beta fish team, and they are the ones that get all of our configurations before it goes out to the whole fleet. It's probably 5% of our organization, maybe a little less, so 10 to 12 users. And they get those things. We warn them ahead of time, say, hey, we're testing this new thing. And when macOS Tahoe becomes available, we will push it to them first and say, try this out, make sure your apps don't horribly break. And we'll test before that, but it just gives us a little bit of a buffer window before we say this is going fleet-wide. Make sure you have some kind of rollback. You don't want to be pushing a firmware update without an old version of the firmware to roll back to if something goes horribly wrong. If you're updating a firewall or a router, have some way that you can get that device back into a good state. Test as an admin and a non-admin. That's something really important. We all tend to have admin rights on our machine. If we are testing locally, you're like, oh yeah, this works great for me. And then you push it out to an end user and they're like, I'm getting all these pop-ups and I don't know what's happening. It's like, oh yeah, I had admin rights, so it just suppressed all of those notifications. So take that extra step. And as much as possible, never test on your production devices. That pretty much covers all the core technology and tools that I would recommend for you to have in your environment at a bare minimum. Is you're looking to grow from beyond here, what I would say is start learning the applications you will be supporting. Creative agency. I need to know at least the bare minimum about Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, Adobe Premiere, all those tools, so that when one of our creatives has an issue, I'm not stumbling through all the menus going, I've never seen this before. Give me a couple hours to learn about Photoshop. I need to be able to react a little more quickly. Start learning basic command line manipulation. There's been so many sessions over the last 10 years at Mac Admins that go through just learning some of those tools. You will open up your ability to manipulate a Mac so much further than if you are only working out of the GUI. There's a lot of stuff that feels restrictive in Mac OS until you get under the hood and into the command line and you realize you actually have a lot more flexibility than people will tell you do. Get some basic programming logic into your vocabulary, just understanding if-then or looping and some of those processes. Even if you're not going to become a programmer, understanding how a program thinks through a problem can help you with troubleshooting. Understanding, well, I put this in here, but it's not coming out there. There's probably a logic gate issue that the application is missing. It really can just help you out in understanding the flow of data through an application or through a system. And if you truly are solo, you don't have a networks team, start learning some small and medium network management because it is going to fall upon you. And when your network falls down, that is one of the scariest times because now all eyes are on you. Hey, the internet's down. Okay, why? I don't know. Now what do I do? Having some of that knowledge in your tool belt will make your life a lot easier. And then to help yourself out even further, start looking at some trusted vendors and start documenting your environment. Documentation isn't fun. It's not pretty. It's kind of a thankless task until you need it. You wrote a script or you implemented a program, 5-10 years ago, and now you're like, why did I do this? How did I do this? Having those cheat sheets to go back to can save you hours and days worth of work. So yeah, that is the technology side of things, and I am breaking everything. So I am just going to blow through these next slides. So I have some slides in here about tools that I recommend starting to implement within your organization, as well as some additional resources. These are all on the QR code at the end, so I want to get to questions. I want to make sure we have time for that. So quickly, have a good text editor. It doesn't have to be BBEdit, but it's free and it gives you coding syntax. Don't use Microsoft Word. Don't use TextEdit because they will inject formatting into your code and things like quotation marks matter. So you will end up breaking your script and not even know why, but that is actually one of those things that I stumbled upon for months. And then I was like, oh, it's because TextEdit's saving in rich text and it's using a fancy quotation mark instead of a straight quotation mark. So BBEdit's a great tool. iMazing Profile Editor. If you're creating configuration profiles for your MDM and they don't have what you want to do out of the box, iMazing Profile Editor probably does, and it's free. So it also gets updates regularly for Apple and third-party software. So check that out. Nudge there is a bunch of different presentations on Nudge, but this allows you to notify your users that they have a Mac OS update. It is IT's best friend and your user's worst nightmare because they're getting those pop-ups saying, hey, I want you to reboot, and users hate rebooting. If you're a Google workspace shop, GAM is a command line tool for managing Google accounts, gives you a lot of flexibility. I highly recommend checking it out. Along with Got Your Back, it's from the GAM team, and it is for downloading backups of Google Workspace accounts. So you can use it to actually pull full backups of a user's email and either store it offline or potentially re-upload it to another user. So if somebody leaves your organization, you can say, oh, I'm just going to pull all that person's email down and give it to their manager. And now you can delete the account. You don't have to keep it on an active license, but you still have all of that email available. And then the Awesome Mac Admins repo, this is a GitHub repo with a bunch of tools on it. There was a lot I hadn't heard of before getting recommended this by another Mac admin. And there is a lot of tools that I recommended that are on this as well. And then some additional resources to help you grow. AI. This is a little controversial, and I am going to spend a little bit of time on this. There are a lot of really useful elements of AI. It will give you some IT concepts. don't trust it implicitly, and I do recommend using a paid account of something like ChatGPT because it will try and train on your data if you are submitting to the free version. There are a number of folks that are going to say don't use AI, and that's fair. If that's something you're not comfortable with and you don't like it, I'm not going to tell you to use it. I am going to tell you that as someone who understands the basics of programming but not able to code, it saved my life a few times where it's been able to put stuff together for me. But treat it like an intern. It's going to be eager to provide an answer. It's often going to be at least partially wrong, and the results always need verifying. Don't just take code or information and send it. Mac Admin Slack, I'm guessing everyone's already a part of it, but if not, join it. Jamf Nation community forums, that is great. Even if you don't use Jamf, there's a lot of stuff in there that applies to all MDMs across the board. Penn State Mac Admins Archives, you have a set of archives that gets larger every year. All of these presentations are recorded and available for you. So check it out. You'll find stuff, even if it's slightly older presentations, the content is still really useful. And then here are some other conferences that have their archives, at least the last couple of years, available online. Blogs, I'm always going to recommend stuff by Rich Troughton. He is an absolute legend in this field and has such great insights. And then Armin Briegel has a few resources between a weekly newsletter and a lot of books on scripting. So if you want to start learning how to script, build packages from scratch, check out his books. They're, I think, like $15-20 on the Apple Bookstore. And then just a couple of consumer-facing resources that usually cover news about Apple. So good way to stay on top of things like, what is that next iPhone going to give? Because your end users are going to ask you, and it's helpful to be informed on it. Resource link is here. I'm going to leave that up for a minute. And I have a few other final words of wisdom, but I'd rather skip over to questions. So we got about 5 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions? Was that helpful in any way? Awesome. Okay, this is my first time presenting at PSU, and actually at any conference, so thank you guys for your attention and your support. I will give you those final words of wisdom if nobody has questions, but test early, test often. I think we've hammered that point home during this presentation. Don't let work consume your life. If you are a small team admin, it's really easy to be on call 24/7 without the benefits of being an on-call employee. So set those boundaries. Tell work, hey, is this an emergency? I will deal with it in the morning. Like, don't be afraid to set those boundaries for yourself because you will burn out. So you want to be able to take care of yourself and your organization. Ask for help when you need it. When we were growing, all of a sudden we went from 40 employees to 75, 80. I had to go to my boss and say, hey, I am at my limit here. So I need some help. And I also had to be realistic and say, like, do I actually not have time, or am I completely out flat? And so I said, no, I am. I'm like doing so much that no progress is happening. And so we had to expand. Have fun and make money. This seems a little tongue-in-cheek, but it's actually one of my company's mottos. And I look at it this way is, yes, IT is hard. It's not always going to be fun. But as a whole, you should enjoy what you're doing. And you should be able to make a living doing it. So if one of those two things isn't true, and it's not true at scale, look at why. And it might just be that you need to have a conversation with your leadership. It might be that you need to look for another opportunity. That's okay. But you should be able to enjoy what you're doing and make a living doing it. So keep that in mind that, it's not you if that's not happening. Stay curious, keep learning. That's going to be the biggest thing with IT. There's no endpoint to this. Everything's advancing all the time. So just stay curious. And, remember, what do you want to be when you grow up? And please provide feedback. Like I said, this is my first time presenting. I would love any feedback. There's more candy up at the front. If anybody wants candy, come grab it. It is courtesy of Rich Troughton and the fine folks at Diamond Assets. Thank you, everybody.